So the federal government shutdown, we know, is winding down, and it appears that after several weeks, it appears that it is headed towards a resolution, but not without controversy. The Senate last night, getting caught up here, passed a bipartisan bill that would end the stalemate, and it now heads back to the House with the support from 8 Democrats as well as the president. So they can vote as soon as tomorrow. Helping us sort things out where they stand today is Amy Sentimentes. She's the assistant professor of political science at Queen's University of Charlotte. And Amy, thank you for joining us this morning on Live Impact News.
Thanks so much for having me.
Let's talk about what happened here. How did this government shutdown over primarily healthcare subsidies, right, to a deal that actually does not include them?
I think as the shutdown continued, the Democrats who did end up deflecting recalculated their decision because they were thinking about two things. I think the upcoming holiday travel and the expiration of SNAP benefits were weighing heavily on their mind, as well as the realistic possibility that they could actually get what they wanted out of this impasse. I know Senator King from Maine, who's an independent who caucuses with the Democratic Party, talked a lot about how he didn't really envision the Republicans caving at all. And so while polls at the moment still place the blame primarily on the Republican Party, he anticipated that an ongoing shutdown would only make that blame a little bit more evenly split, and so the Democrats may actually suffer consequences if the shutdown continued. However, there have been some, like you said, controversies because the remaining senators who did not deflect viewed this as a real issue with their party because they wanted to stand firm and use this as an opportunity not only to continue these healthcare subsidies, but also to use their power to stand up to President Trump and his administration.
Yeah, after a strong election last week with some of those key elections in the Democratic Party, now we're seeing some significant fractures. What does that say about the Democratic Party's strategy moving forward?
I think this remains to be seen. They did have a strong week last week, but I think it speaks more broadly to the fact that in the United States, we have a really candidate-centered electoral process. And so while these candidates last week were extremely popular, Zohran Mamdani in New York City, Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, and Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey, they all led campaigns catered to the voters in their states or cities respectively, but polls still show that the public feels very negatively toward the Democratic Party as a whole, especially Leader Schumer in the Senate and Hakeem Jeffries in the House. So I think moving forward, the voters now probably will continue that discontent they feel toward the Democratic Party and make it even harder for them to unite based on a common strategy as they approach the vote in the House, and then also going forward how they might respond to this administration when media coverage and voters perceive this as caving to the administration.
Yeah, interesting in putting it that way and saying that it's a candidate-centric that made for some strong showings last week. This deal, again, does not extend any of the subsidies to the Affordable Care Act, which means 20 million Americans could see their insurance premiums increase. Help our viewers understand what this means as an everyday impact.
I think as the economy continues to be perceived in a very uncertain light, as costs escalate for groceries and other common goods, voters and individuals in this country are increasingly stressed and are very uncertain about the future. And so with healthcare subsidies increasing, it's only going to add more fuel to that fire. And it's going to cause a lot of stress that has continued since last year in the presidential election. So I think it's really weighing heavily on the minds of voters. But like I said, with the ongoing shutdown, I think short-term factors really played a role in those 8 senators' votes on Sunday night. So it was a sort of cost-benefit analysis for more in the long-term views on healthcare versus the short-term impact of the airline industry having to respond to the shutdown, and then also the SNAP benefits and other key Democratic policies and those that affect Republican states really weighing heavily on the short term for these voters.
So the funding would help the government fund the government, I should say, until January 30th. What happens then? What can people expect? Are we just kicking the can down the road?
It certainly seems that way, and I think voters think the same. And so this is not a forever solution that they've proposed. It's more like they're putting it off until after the holiday season, and that might buy them some time on both sides. I think a lot of the coverage now is centered on what this will do in the 2026 midterms. And so again, those senators who did deflect, they anticipate that this will help their party going forward, because now the ball is in the Republicans' court, because they know Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, is quite popular for these voters. They don't want their subsidies to expire. And so now it's up to the Republicans, and they're hoping that voters will punish them next year in the midterm elections. But as far as in January, I think people see it as just going right back where we started back at the end of September.
Unfortunately so. But like you said, the cost effect equation comes into play as we are feeling it on an everyday basis, right? Between holidays and travel and SNAP benefits. All right. So more to come, I'm sure. Dr. Amy Sentimenti is Assistant Professor of Political Science at Queen's University here in Charlotte. Appreciate the time.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
Thank you. You too.